Hello and welcome to the Weird Record Club, and today we're going to get heavily psychedelic. Yes, we're going to explore the psychedelic era of the Everly Brothers, 66 to 68 pretty much. So I've always been fascinated with a genre that we might call unlikely dealia, which is square artists who had a flirtation with psychedelia. So that's the case with the Everly Brothers. Now, they weren't really out there. If you think, they weren't Jimi Hendrix, they weren't Syd Barrett's Pink Floyd, but they did have an interesting period in the psychedelic era where they flirted with psychedelic music. So of course, the Everly Brothers started out as two children singing with their family on a family radio show. So they were involved in the country music scene, and then later in the late 50s and early 60s, rock and roll hits like Wake Up Little Susie and Bird Dog, and of course the classic death disc Ebony Eyes. So, but we're going to look at what happens when they try to move with the times. You know, along come the Beatles and the British Beat Group, and then Psychedelia, and then Country Psych, the Byrds, and so on. And they sort of followed these trends in a quite interesting period. So let's go back to 1966 first of all, and you get the Hollies go freakbeat, beat, proto-psych, whatever you want to call it, and that's this record here, Two Yanks in England. So you can see Don and Phil there hanging around in London. There's the other side. They've got some sleeve notes about where to go for buying clothes for the pub and so on. Some fun sleeve notes there. This record belonged to J Day, whoever he was, so thank you for passing it on to me. So the interesting thing about this album is it was recorded with the Hollies as their backing band. So the Hollies, around about this time, would have been working on their first really psychedelic tinged album, Evolution, which you can see behind my shoulder up here with its fantastic psychedelic cover photo. So the Hollies are the backing band on this record. They actually wrote many of the songs, perhaps most of the songs, under their pseudonym of Ransford. They even do Have You Ever Loved Somebody, which is a song that features on Evolution. So it's an interesting record because it's a new sound for the Hollies. You've got quite a lot of fuzz guitar. You've got a freak beat sound in a lot of places. You've got some unusual subject matter. So, and I think Somebody Help Me, which kicks it off, has that kind of freak beat guitar sound. I don't know whether the freak beat fuzzy guitar really works that well with the Everly Brothers' sweet harmonies. So I don't think they've quite found their feet with this sort of English beat yet. I can see Ozzy is about to knock the Everly Brothers off their throne, and he's done it. Crash. Yes, thanks, Ozzy. Okay, well, so another thing I suppose that's quite interesting about this record is that it's very anglophile. In some places, the Everly Brothers are trying to sound English, and they sound a bit like the Zombies on She's Not There, with this exaggerated English accent, which is unintentionally hilarious. Now, there's also an unnecessary cover version of Pretty Flamingo, the Manfred Mann song, which needn't have been there. A standout, I think, is The Collector. So The Collector, it sounds almost like Graham Nash is singing this one, and it's a really dark song. I presume it's based on the John Fowles novel, in which someone who collects butterflies decides to collect a girl and keep her locked up. So that's quite a dark subject matter for the Everlys at this point. There's also Fifi the Flea, which I think the Hollies also did on one of their earlier albums. You little git. On one of their earlier albums, a song about a flea who falls in love with a clown flea in a flea circus, and then it ends tragically and everyone dies. However, I think Ozzy would probably agree with me that the only good flea is a dead flea. Anyway, it sort of lands in the tradition of spooky fairground music that was very common in psychedelia from things like being for the benefit of Mr. Kite and the Skeleton in the Roundabout by the Idle Race and so on. So it fits into that. So that's a really interesting one. So there is some interesting subject matter. There's some freak beats, a bit of proto-psych. So it makes it an interesting and unusual album for the Everly Brothers. Now, the following year, we get the Everly Brothers sing. So deceptively, this is in a very muted brown cover, but this is where some of their most psychedelic work is to be found. Again, we've got a load of sleeve notes on the back. Now, one thing about the Everly Brothers at this time is they've got an English bass player, Terry Slater, and he seems to have been trying to help the Everlys keep, to be more with it. So this is the album where you get the Everly Brothers' first, possibly only drug song, Mary Jane. Yes, a song about marijuana sung by the Everlys, promoting drug use. Can you believe it? But there it is, Mary Jane, clearly a drug song. Did the Everlys know what it was when they recorded it? I guess they must have. But anyway, that's with its strange time signatures. That's probably the most psychedelic moment. But also you've got Talking to the Flowers as well, which is another sort of flower power type thing. So there is a kind of a harmony, sunshine pop element that they're trying to go down. And most of this album works well. And it's a really interesting listen. The thing that lets it down are the last two songs. It sounds like they've run out of time and stuck these last two songs on. One of them is a truly atrocious cover of White a Shade of Pale, which has got to be heard to be believed. And that's followed by Mercy, 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 which sounds like it's from another era. Also, they do put Somebody Help Me, which is on Two Yanks in England, on here again. So I think there's about a side of really good stuff on the Everly Brothers Sing, and it's probably the most psychedelic, really, although it rarely goes beyond a kind of slightly trippy sunshine pop. But it's worth getting for Mary Jane to hear the Everlys sing about the wonders of marijuana. So finally, in the psychedelic era, we're going to talk about the album Roots, notable for, well, apart from the very tight trousers that the guys are wearing on the front, which perhaps gives away rather too much detail. Here's the back. You can see at the back you've got some photos of Don and Phil when they're children and, entertaining. And that's one of the things about this record is that I think on this one they really get it. They really get the kind of mix of a little bit of psychedelia and a bit of country, and maybe it's influenced by the Byrds, but they're on more home territory. They're not trying to be English. They're being true to their roots, and I guess that's why it's called Roots. So again, Terry Slater, the English bassist, plays a large role writing many of the songs on this record. Now, the really interesting thing about this, and what makes it a little bit trippy, is that the album's interspersed with clips of the Everlys as children with their parents on their radio show, doing their sort of sweet family sing-alongs, and those sort of segue into the sort of more mature, dark country psychedelia that the rest of the record has. So there are things like wah-wah guitar and some studio trickery. There's a fake scratch record effect and all that. There's wah-wah, there's fuzz guitar on there. And I think the mixing of their sort of childhood performances with the more mature stuff is actually rather poignant. On the other hand, it's still quite hard. Some of the songs are sort of about prisoners on death row, and it's hard to feel that the Everlys would be prisoners on death row. I don't know if they quite got that right, but on the whole, I think Roots is the Everlys' finest work. It's consistent. It's fun. It has elements of trippiness, and although it's called Roots, it really does get to their roots with the really enjoyable mix of family radio shows with this more strange, dark country on the other side, and the montage that finishes it. So there we have it. Everly psychedelic. Well, it's not heavily psychedelic, but there are psychedelic elements which make it the Everly psychedelic period quite interesting, really, especially from a weird record perspective. So, have you heard these records? What do you think? That was Ozzy again, Up to Mischief. So I'm going to go and spank that little beggar now. Anyway, I'll see you next time on the Weird Record Club. Bye-bye.